Today we're doing a side-by-side comparison of the Omega MoonWatch to the Omega MoonSwatch. Stay tuned, this is going to be pretty interesting. Now, I wanted to do this video a week ago, but the problem was the crystal on the MoonSwatch was just so cheap that it scratched up so quick. This is going to be in the cons section or at the very end of the video, and I had to get some polywatch in right here just to be able to clean up the crystal enough to photograph it. It really was slightly disappointing, especially with the price point of $260. But that being said, let's just get right into the video. The first thing we're going to talk about side by side are sizes. How close is the MoonSwatch to the MoonWatch? Well, the MoonSwatch itself laying here. Now, first, let me explain that there are no straps on this video. Now, the strap that came with the MoonSwatch is kind of cheap. I did a con of the strap in my video that has to do with the MoonSwatch, how disappointed I was really with it. So I just left the straps out of the video. It's not really fair to compare a MoonWatch strap to a MoonSwatch strap. So when you guys are looking at the dimensions, trust me, it really doesn't matter when it comes to the strap. So that being said, the dimensions of the watch. Now the MoonSwatch comes in at 42 millimeters. The thickness is 13.1. The lug to lug is 47 and the lug width is 20. The good news about the lug width is if I want to put a chase strap on this watch, I absolutely can, and I just may do it at the end of the video. Stay tuned. Now the MoonWatch. The MoonWatch comes in at the exact same measurement of 42 millimeters in diameter, so it does wear nearly the same. The weight's not the same, but at least the dimensions are very, very close. The thickness of the MoonWatch, the Speedmaster, is 14.2, slightly thick, mostly because of the crystal. We'll get into that in just a minute. The lug width is 20 millimeters and the lug to lug is 48, so it's just slightly bigger. When you look at the way the MoonSwatch looks compared to the MoonWatch, it almost feels like they took a casting of the MoonWatch and they poured plastic in to make the MoonSwatch. Now, during the casting process, there was some slight shrinkage and everything's not the exact same, but it's pretty close. Now, when you look at things like the crystal on the MoonSwatch is slightly smaller, it's not as domed, and it's more cheaply made. When you look at other aspects of the watch to include the case shape, the case dimensions, the lug dimensions, everything is pretty close. And I say that because when you look at the lugs, for example, the lugs have the same sweeping motion inward to the strap and the same chamfered edges on the case. Now the chamfered edges clearly aren't there on the MoonSwatch because it's all just one color. It's not high polished, but you can see it on the MoonWatch, the Speedmaster. Now it looks like they tried to get everything pretty close, especially when it comes to the crowns and the crown guards. You can see it almost looks like I said, they took a casting of the MoonWatch and made a plastic MoonSwatch. This is going to be pretty evident during the video itself. Now, everything's not the exact same. When you look at something like the dials are slightly off. Though they both have 3 subdials, the dimensions are not the same. The dial on the MoonSwatch is slightly larger than the MoonWatch. Now, it's only by a couple millimeters, but it's enough to where when I try to kind of put them together in the thumbnail, you can see that not everything lines up. Now, if we're going to stay on the dial, let's talk about the printing on the dial. Of course, the Omega MoonWatch Speedmaster, it's impeccable with the dial. Everything is almost perfect. The printing is perfect. The subdials are perfect. Everything is exactly the way you'd think it would be on a multiple $1,000 watch. Now, the Speedmaster that I have here that I'm comparing is actually over 40 years old And you can see that quality really does stand up, especially with the hands of time. No pun intended when it deals with the hands on a watch when I say the hands of time. Now, when you look at the MoonSwatch, you can see that it does also have 3 subdials, and it's relatively the same as the MoonWatch, except things are slightly different. The subdials are slightly higher on the watch. You can see that the subdials on the MoonSwatch are closer to the 10 and 2, whereas the subdials on the MoonWatch are closer to the 9 and the 3. This is a classic design of most chronographs, but MoonSwatch, for some reason, have them raised slightly. Not really a deal breaker. It's just one of those things where it's not exactly what you'd expect. I'd expect almost a 1-to-1 ratio with the MoonWatch and the MoonSwatch, but it's really not. When you look at the printing of the MoonWatch, the Speedmaster, the original Speedmaster Professional, again, like I said, everything is almost perfect. Then when you look at the MoonSwatch, you can see that there are some issues with the printing. It's not as clear as the Omega Professional, and there are some quality control issues. I don't know if this is because of Omega or if this is because of Swatch. Now, this is a collaboration between the two companies. Really, it's Swatch who owns Omega. It's really Swatch saying, Omega, you're going to do this collaboration. It's going to help us both. It's going to boost us both in the recognition of our names. However, when they actually made the watch, it's relatively disappointing, especially for a price point of almost $300. Both offer tachymeters, both have relatively the same shape of case, and both have a chronograph function. One has the manual wind Speedmaster chronograph, and the other one has a 4-jewel quartz movement. Now, when it comes to price points at almost $300, it's really hard for me not to think of companies like Pagani Design or St. Martin, who use mecha quartz movements, which are a hybrid of a mechanical movement and a quartz movement. Instead, they just went straight quartz. So when you do hit that chronograph function on the MoonSwatch, it does tick at 1 tick a second, not only in the subdial, the 6 o'clock for the second hand, but in the center counting seconds for the counting chronograph. This, I honestly think, is kind of disappointing because there's so many other movements they could have used and it wouldn't have cost them hardly any more money. Materials are obviously not even comparable, with the Omega MoonWatch Speedmaster sporting 316L stainless steel, has really nice brushing, has really nice polishing. It's that classic look you'd expect from a higher end watch. Then you move over to the Omega MoonSwatch Speedmaster and you have that bioceramic. Now, bioceramic, everybody knows, is really just cheap plastic that's colored in whatever color wave that you want for the mission that you want. Mine specifically is Mission Earth, so it's a green color. So that is what I have. They also have other colors out there. Again, the bioceramic is just another way to say cheap plastic. Now let's talk about the crystals on the watch. Now, the Omega Speedmaster has a Hesselite crystal. Now they offer sapphire as well, but the one I have here is a Hesselite crystal, which means it is that classic MoonWatch crystal, which means it's impact resistant. They didn't really care that much about scratch resistant with a sapphire crystal. In space, you care more about impact resistance. You really don't want a sapphire that shatters in space and then you have things flying all over the place because there's zero gravity. So they chose something like a Hesselite crystal. I don't blame them for that, and a little bit of polywatch solves any type of gouges or scratches in the crystal. In fact, I did years back on this exact same Speedmaster, I did a polywatch review on how to clean up your crystal. Again, that's years back. I'll still leave a link up here if you guys are interested. Now, that being said, when you look at the same quality of crystal that's on the MoonSwatch, it is far below the same grade. Now, the Omega Speedmaster MoonWatch can really take a beating. And then I've just barely worn the MoonSwatch, and not only did it not take a beating, but it scratched up worse than any other watch that I've ever owned, ever. Now we're talking a watch that's $260 at retail, and if you want it in the gray market, it's over $100 more than that. So you're talking $360 to $400, if not more, in the gray secondary market. That, to me, means that it should have higher quality materials, but it doesn't. It has a cheaper crystal, and the Hesselite crystal is not that expensive. In fact, in today's world, you have companies like Pagani Design that create watches that are similar to this, that have a solid stainless steel case, a sapphire domed crystal, and a mecha quartz movement. So you have the best of both of a mechanical and the quartz. So you have that sweeping second hand of the time, but you have the high precision of the quartz movement. Those are $100. So what are you really paying for when you are looking at the Omega MoonSwatch? Well, clearly you're just paying for the Omega name. Is it worth the $260? Well, it really depends. All this really depends. Are you able to go to an authorized dealer and pick up a watch that you want? If they only have the Omega MoonSwatches that you really don't want, that aren't attractive to you, then you shouldn't spend your money. You shouldn't get it just because it says Omega and it's under $300. You should wait and get the one that you want. Now, if you're able to get the one that you want and it makes you happy, of course, buy the watches that make you happy. But remember, when it comes to the Omega Swatch collaboration and the MoonSwatch, it is not going to retain the value that something like the Omega Speedmaster will. The Omega Speedmaster retains value, not as much as a Rolex, but it does retain value. In fact, this 1970s Speedmaster is still a few $1,000s, and it was purchased for a few $100s back when it was brand new. That being said, the MoonSwatch will never be like that. It is, again, like I explained in the beginning of the video, it's like they took a silicone mold of this watch and then they let it sit for a while on the shelf. They let it shrink slightly in its drying process, and then they created this, the MoonSwatch, out of plastic. And I get why they did it, because I do like the MoonSwatch. I don't own an Omega. This is my buddy's Omega that I've featured on the channel multiple times because this is his father's. Every time he gives it to me, he always says, "Now Chase, this is a gift, the last gift from my dying father. Please make sure you take care of it." So I absolutely do. But that being said, this is not my Omega. The only Omega I own is the MoonSwatch. And as much as I love it, I also hate it. It's like a gift and a curse at the same time. It's a double-edged sword. It cuts one way in goodness and it cuts the other way in badness. Not only does it have a shitty strap that is garbage that I have to replace because a little bit of bug spray made everything unclear in its reading, but it scratches worse than anything else. I've never had a watch scratch so easily than this. Yes, is the domed plexiglass that's covering it, the plastic, is it domed so it's gonna hit more? Yeah, but even if you hit something like a pusher, it's still gonna break. It's going to break. If I gave this to my son who's 8 and he wore it for a day, it would be broken. If I gave him this and he wore it for a day, it would be fine. Yes, you are paying different pricing, but is it worth spending $300 on a MoonSwatch when I looked on eBay and you could spend $1,500 on a used Speedmaster? May not be in the best condition, but you have all the original Speedmaster parts. You can use some polywash to clean it up. You can take it to a watch maker and have them polish the case so it looks almost brand new. Is it worth buying the MoonSwatch or is it worth buying the MoonWatch? Well, it's really up to you. It always comes down to what do you want to spend your money on? I like the MoonSwatch. I like the idea of the MoonSwatch. My disappointment in it is the cheap materials. Even the bioceramic, the plastic, I can get off of. I can go with that. It is light when I wear it on the wrist. Even the cheap strap, I find to be comfortable. But what's not okay for me is the quality control on the dial, which is not perfect, and it says Omega and Swatch, and Swatch is a conglomerate. It is an umbrella company who owns so much more. It's worth over $2 billion a year. You think they could have some quality control on a watch that they push so hard that they put Omega's brand on it, that it created a frenzy in the marketplace that it would have a nearly perfect dial, and it doesn't. There's imperfections on the dial. The crystal is crap, and the case I can let go, and the strap I can let go, but the other two I cannot. So again, it really all depends. This is for you guys to see that side-by-side comparison of the Omega versus the Omega. Some people do it, some people don't. Some people don't have the opportunity to do a side-by-side. Luckily, I'm able to. Is the MoonSwatch worthy of having the Omega name? Kind of. It is a copy. It's an homage of itself. That's really how I see it. The Omega Swatch collaboration, the MoonSwatch, is an homage to the MoonWatch Speedmaster. It's an homage. It is no better than any other homage out there that doesn't say Omega, except it says Omega. So I'll leave it up to interpretation. Let's talk about it in the comments below. If you like this video, hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment of the content you guys would like to see. My light just turned off. I don't understand why, but we're going to finish off this video. Make sure you guys hit that notification bell. I have a lot of videos coming up in the future. Hopefully this microphone setup is way better than the Blue Yeti Nano I was using. People complain that it kind of crackled in the background. I don't understand why. I used a bunch of stuff to try to problem solve and fix it. Nothing ever worked. So I bought a new microphone. Hopefully this is better. Again, leave a comment down below if it is. I really appreciate your feedback. 15,000 subscribers. We're not that far away. I will be giving away a Tissot PRX automatic that is in the mail for review in about a month. I have so much stuff coming up. Make sure you guys hit that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next one.